Welcome back. We are just a few hours away from Game 3 between the Barrie Colts and the Oshawa Generals. The series right now tied at one game apiece. It's been an exciting series so far and a lot of drama in game number 2, especially with the disallowed goal in the final minutes. It's going to be fascinating to see how the two teams react as this series shifts now to the Saddlein Arena in Barrie. But I wanted to take a bit of a break from talking about the playoffs and start looking at the teams that are focused on next season. We already had the OHL draft lottery that took place last week. And of course, the Windsor Spitfires won the draft lottery, but the team that had the best odds, the Niagara IceDogs, they ended up falling to 4th. So the offseason already getting off to a bit of a shaky start. So I wanted to start looking at the Niagara IceDogs and what this team can expect going forward, because I've already had questions from a few IceDog fans asking, when is this team likely going to make the playoffs again? When are they going to be competitive? So I think this team, they're close to making the playoffs, maybe as early as next season. But let's do a deep dive, recap how the season went, and then look at some of the pieces as we move forward for Niagara. And this is actually the third year in a row that the Niagara IceDogs have finished 20th in the OHL standings. And 4 seasons ago, they placed 19th. So out of the last 4 seasons, they've finished in the bottom 2 positions in the OHL standings. It has been a very tough era of hockey right now in the city of St. Catharines, especially with how dominant this team has been in the past. They moved to St. Catharines from Mississauga in the 2007-2008 season, and since then, really, Niagara's been one of those teams that's been consistently competitive. They've been challenging for the division title. They actually, the last time they were in the playoffs, they won the Central Division Championship. That was in 2019, but since then, no playoffs. So it's been a real tough go for the IceDogs. And for this team, there's also been the off-ice issues with the sanctions, and then, of course, the ownership change. So a lot has been going on both on and off the ice with this Niagara IceDog franchise. And this season, we did see some improvements from the year before, but it just feels like a lot of pain, and eventually the team's going to reap the benefits. They will start making the playoffs again, and you'll get playoff hockey at the Meridian Center because it's a beautiful arena. And if you haven't been to the rink in St. Catharines, it's definitely worth checking out. So let's look at back the last 5 seasons. And the last time they made the playoffs was 2018-2019. They had a record of 44, 17, and 7. Niagara having 95 points that year. That clinched top spot in the Central Division. And since then, they fell off. In 2019-2020, of course, that was the shortened season. They had a record of 18, 39, 5, and 1, 42 points. At that point, they were 2 points back of Kingston for the final playoff spot, but because of the pandemic and everything, the season was shut down, so no playoffs that year. But Niagara, they were 19th that season. So it was the start of things to come, really, for the IceDogs. Then we missed the 2020-21 season, and then back in 21-2022, they had a record of 22, 42, 3, and 1, 48 points. And that was 20th overall in the OHL standings that season. And that year, they ended up losing the draft lottery. They fell to 4th that season. They ended up drafting Sam Dickinson that year. And then Dickinson was then flipped to the London Knights. So it's kind of, as I said, it's been a trend for Niagara. They haven't been able to win the OHL draft lottery, and it dates back to the 2022 draft. Last season in 2022-23, Niagara hit rock bottom. They had a record of 12, 47, 8, and 1, just 33 points. So you see that 19, they had 95 points, and then by 2023, they dropped all the way to 33 points. So despite that, the fans, they kept coming out that season. They were still getting a good attendance at the Meridian Center. The fans, they're passionate in St. Catharines for their Niagara IceDogs, but despite that, the fans kept coming out. But coming into this season, 23-24, they ended up having a record of 17, 43, 6, and 2. So an improvement from the year before. They ended up with 42 points, which matches the 2019-20 shortened season. And again, Niagara finishing 20th. So it's 3 straight years at the bottom of the overall standings in the Ontario Hockey League. But there were signs of improvement last season. You may remember they recorded back-to-back wins for the first time in over a year. They won a game in overtime against the Kitchener Rangers, and then they returned home to beat the Peterborough Petes. So that was the first time they had a back-to-back wins in nearly 2 seasons. But also what happened, if you remember, is Marcus Vandenberg, over those 2 games, he was named the OHL Goaltender of the Week and then was traded to the Sudbury Wolves. That's been a common theme these last 2 seasons for Niagara, are the amount of trades. And that really started when you had the ownership, when Dobler took over the team from the Burks going into the previous season. And then, of course, the off-ice sanctions, he was suspended, so he's not the GM this season. But just with a lot of the moves, it seems to be that there are some connections still there. But still, that's been a problem for Niagara these last 2 years. It's just they haven't had that consistency. The lineup keeps being in flux. They keep getting new players who then get traded out. I'm thinking Brody Crane, who was picked up from the London Knights and then flipped to the Guelph Storm at the trade deadline. There was, you had Bronson Ride, who was picked up from the Windsor Spitfires, and then he's sent off to North Bay this year. The list goes on and on with the amount of trades that have happened over the last 2 seasons. So it's hard for a team to generate that consistency, and even for the fans to get familiar with the players on the ice. It's been a revolving door of trades, but there is the core pieces, which I think Niagara is starting to take shape. Let's look at the top 10 scorers from this past season. Starting off, Gavin Bryant, 21 goals, 33 assists, good for 54 points. Bryant, he was picked up from the Owen Sound Attack. He has fit in nicely for Niagara. Kevin He, so much fun to watch. He had 31 goals, 22 assists, 53 points. And you also notice outside the top 3, the points really drop off the Niagara IceDogs. So Gavin Bryant, Kevin He, 1-2. And then the rookie, Ryan Robrick, 28 goals, 23 assists, good for 51 points. Robrick, of course, setting franchise records for rookie goal scoring. So there's a lot of excitement there. Even just with Kevin He and Ryan Robrick, this team, I think, is starting to show signs that they have that nucleus to build around. Then it drops off. Mike Levin, he was 4th in scoring, 18 goals, 17 assists, 35 points. So there's the drop off, 51-35. Matthew Paris, 11 goals, 20 assists, 31 points on the season. Alex Asadorian, the former Sudbury Wolves player, 8 goals, 19 assists, 27 points. Asadorian missed some time there due to injury, which is rather unfortunate because Asadorian, he's pretty good up front. He's a player that you brings that sandpaper and kind of a bit of an agitator out there as well, but he can contribute offensively. And then you have another rookie, Ivan Galyanov, 8 goals, 16 assists, 24 points. Galyanov looking pretty good in that second half. You could see signs of improvement. He's another player I think the Niagara IceDogs will want to build around. Then you had Urban Podrakar, 3 goals, 19 assists, good for 22 points. Ethan Zada, another rookie. He was selected 5th overall last season. He had 7 goals, 10 assists, 17 points. He was, at times showing what he's capable of. So there's a lot of upside with Ethan Zada. And then rounding up the top 10 in scoring for the Niagara IceDogs last season, Ryan Van Etten, 4 goals, 10 assists, good for 14 points. Van Etten, of course, a defenseman who is kind of a stay-at-home defenseman. He's not going to be too flashy on the offensive side, but he can get the pucks out of the zone, great on the power play unit. That's an area that Niagara, I'm sure, would like to improve on going into next season as the specialty teams. But that's your top 10 scorers. So it drops off. You had number 1, of course, Gavin Bryant with the 54 points, and then you drop all the way to Van Etten at 10th, and he only had 14 points. So offense, it's needed desperately with this Niagara IceDogs team if they're going to take that next step to become a playoff team next year. And the Niagara IceDogs, they only had one overager graduating this season, and that was St. Catharines native Connor Federkow. He was picked up from the London Knights the season prior. He fit in nicely with this team. He was outside on the top 10 in scoring, which is unfortunate because he also had some issues staying healthy this year. Actually, if you look at the whole lineup, a lot of the players on this Niagara IceDogs team didn't have that consistent play. There was injuries. They were playing shorthanded at times during the regular season, which didn't help as they were trying to get wins and they were trying to keep pace with the Barrie Colts for that final playoff spot. But Federkow, the only player graduating as an overager this season, which is fascinating. And you'll remember, too, at the OHL trade deadline, they picked up Anson Thornton from the Barrie Colts. Obviously, Thornton did not report, and it was just for the Colts so they could move him out. They had his rights, and the IceDogs took that at the deadline. But if you look at the overage candidates for next season, things are going to be a little fascinating because in the Ontario Hockey League, you're allowed to play 3 overagers a night, but you can protect some overagers because you can carry an extra overager up until the OHL trade deadline. Then you have to drop down to 3. And the options include Gavin Bryant. Of course, he led the team in scoring. Expect him to stay. Michael Podolou. he had a lot of injuries this season. We didn't really get to see a whole lot from him. Does he stick around next year as an overager? Time will tell. I only put Alexei Kulikov down because he's an 0-4, but he only played 3 games at the end of the season. I don't know if he'll be an overager. We'll have to wait and see on that front. Then you have Evan Klein, the defenseman, Ryan Van Etten, another defenseman, and then your goaltender, Owen Flores. So I would expect Flores to come back, probably Gavin Bryant, but then outside of that, which defenseman do you pick? Do you pick Evan Klein, Ryan Van Etten? These could also be trade chips during the offseason going into next year as teams look to upgrade their overager situation. So the IceDogs, they do have some decisions to make, so time will tell. And even looking at these overagers, Owen Flores has shown signs that he's more than capable of being a full-time starter in this league. He carried the bulk of the load up until they picked up Charlie Robertson at the OHL trade deadline from Niagara. So he's got a lot of upside too. So maybe the IceDogs stick with Robertson and then Flores could go on to another team. But still, like I said, a lot of questions with this Niagara IceDogs team. But I think they've got the right pieces. When you've got Kevin He and Ryan Robrick as your top forwards going into next year with Gavin Bryant, you could see there that there's signs of that this team is heading in the right direction as long as they don't make the amount of trades that they did the last 2 years. I think they set records 2 years ago with the amount of trades they made. So if they can find that consistency and build around their key pieces, this team, they could compete for a playoff spot next year. This team, they hold the 4th overall draft pick. I touched on that at the start of this video, which is rather unfortunate. I think with the league, the way they did it, they just did the flashcards to show who won the OHL draft. And I know there's some people who are saying that the league didn't want Niagara to have that 1st overall pick with everything that's gone on off the ice with the optics and whatnot, but I highly doubt the league would have done that. However, it'd be nice if the league maybe was a little transparent. I know the NHL, when they do their draft lottery, they'll do a behind-the-scenes video with Gary Bettman showing them actually having the ping pong balls, lining up the numbers to then decide who gets that 1st overall pick at the National Hockey League level. I don't think they use the ping pong ball system from how they describe it in the press release for the OHL entry draft. It sounds like they use a randomizer online with a lawyer overlooking things. But still, just to be transparent to show that there's nothing against the Niagara IceDogs here. This is just how things fell together. But if you're not transparent, that's where these conspiracy theories are going to run wild. I think it'd be fascinating to see the behind the scenes look. I think it'd be great if the OHL was transparent on the draft lottery system. So then we don't have these questions about whether or not the draft was rigged or if there's favoritism going on. Even with the way they do suspensions, it would be nice to have some more transparency to maybe go over why they suspended a player for what he did. Take, for example, Max Nemestikov of the Guelph Storm. They used to do videos describing what led to the suspension and what led to their decisions. And I think that would clear a bit of the air, I think, with fans around the Ontario Hockey League. Maybe not for everybody, but I think you'd be on the right track if you're being a little more transparent. It could be just short videos, kind of like what I'm doing here on YouTube. As simple as that, just so the fans are more involved, they've got the knowledge, and then we know what's going on. So that's my rant about that. But still, I wanted to look at the Niagara IceDogs, how they did this past season, and what to expect going into next year. I think this Niagara team will improve going into next season. I really like Kevin He. Gavin Bryant is an outstanding forward on that team. And then, of course, you've got Robrick, who he's going to be a beast in the OHL. Expect him to be a top NHL draft pick when it's his turn to get his name called, because Robrick was outstanding this year in his rookie season. And I think he's going to continue that next year with Niagara. So that's what I'm seeing here with the Niagara IceDogs. If you're an IceDogs fan, love to hear your feedback. What do you expect from this team going forward? What kind of question marks do you have about this team? And if you're not a fan of Niagara, still love to see the interactions down below. Thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're here at this point in the video, thanks again. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And we'll talk to you again soon.